Nothing, Nick.
Wow, well, that's an inauspicious start. So last week I was off with a cold. Oh, there we go. Oh, Jesus. Everything stopped working. Let's see if we can start the show again. Shall I try that again and see if it works? It doesn't seem to. Okay, that's an interesting thing. So basically my playlist button doesn't work. Anyway, hello, welcome to Sonictalk, episode 691, postponed from last week. I'm starting to blush. I can feel the tops of my ears go red because I've had such a poor technical start to the show. I do apologise for that. It will be back to normal. Last week I had to postpone. I wasn't feeling so well. So we will hopefully be back to normal next week. This is the podcast to do with music technology. Music technology, we cover all things to do with the instruments, synthesizers, all that kind of stuff. So I want to say thank you very much to our chatties. We've got people in the YouTube live stream. We've got people in the IRC and on the Discord and the Twitch. And of course, if you fancy supporting us, you can join us on Patreon. We've been posting a lot of stuff. In fact, we started to post custom sample packs with using the Decent Sampler, as I said I was going to do. Got one there from the RC505, which is a review we just posted. Also, some sounds from the Ensoniq SQ, the Arturia SQ80V plugin from Chris Midiera. So I want to say thank you to him for posting those. If you want to join us, just head over to patreon.com/Sonicstate. So let's see if anything else works. I'm now feeling a little bit underconfident that all the rest of my tech is going to work. We'll hope it does, but we'll just have to see. So let's say hello to some guests. We'll start over there in Brighton with Mr. Steve Hillier. SteveHillier.net. How are you, Steve? Is everything working? Can you hear me? Over.
Yeah, no, everything's working, Nick.
Phew.
I'm just road testing my new MacBook Pro here, actually, and it seems to be working perfectly well. Although, as we were sort of discussing earlier, I had Dropbox running in the background, which seems to just want to take all the resources it can possibly take simultaneously. But I force quit that, and now I think we're cooking with, should we say, gas?
Yeah, well, they're starting to come. I'm actually not running the show on an M1 here. I've just got the one that Apple sent, and I've been testing that. So I'm going to be doing a video this week, hopefully, of kind of what my thoughts are and what it's good for and all those sort of things. I've got the 14-inch base model, which, to be honest, there's not that much different to when the other, you know, even the first generation M1s in terms of performance, because they're so massively powerful for the sort of stuff that we do that, you know, the slightly more didn't seem to make as much difference as I thought. But good to see. The camera's good. Your camera, look, because it's a 1080 camera, isn't it? And the mic is probably better as well, because I think that's true. So
yeah. It looks really nice on my screen, although I've made the classic mistake of being lit by the sun over here and from behind as well. And maybe I should work that out maybe the next time.
It's easy to do. But yes, well, thank you for joining us, Steve. Lovely to have you. We've also got Mr. Matt Hodson, aka Maths, who is there in his modular studio in where he's a producer, composer, and also works for BIM as an educator as well. How are you then, Matt?
Yeah, I'm good. Yeah, someone keeps saying whenever I'm on Zoom calls and I've got this behind me, people keep saying I could, if it all goes wrong, I could just end up working in a telephone exchange. Although I don't know if they still do it like that anymore. I guess it's all digital these days.
I'm pretty sure they don't. Yeah.
I don't know. But yeah, I'm all good. This is my latest amazing addition to the studio, which is a brush.
The Fiasco decorator's brush, yes.
Yeah, it's like a decorator's brush, and it's just brilliant for just getting dust off things. It just gets, even while everything's patched, it's just so cool for cleaning stuff. And they're really, really cheap, and you can see already the amount of rubbish that's coming off it. So yeah, that's my latest addition to the studio. Other than that, just working on this month's tune. Only 2 months away from completing my my project this year, which was to release one song every single month. And I've got 2 more to do, and then I've done it. So yeah, just working on that at the minute. But yeah, good to be here. Are
you going to take a break, or are you going to start back on the 12 again, or how's that going to work?
It's a good question. I'm actually going to do a video sort of talking about the benefits of releasing a song every month, and for the independent music producer, and what the benefits are, what the pros and cons are. I think I'm going to continue though, just to kind of summarize that. But hang tight for the video, because I'll share some stats on sales, on streaming, on social media engagement, and all that kind of thing. It's been a bit of a research project. So
brilliant.
But yeah, it's been good, and thanks for everyone who supported me.
That sounds like a great idea, actually. What a brilliant idea. I'd be very interested to know that stuff myself. I mean, as we know, we're actually now a year into our Patreon experiment and launch. And so still figuring stuff out. It's very different. When you start to work with that mindset, it becomes a completely different sort of process. And you've really got to think about it to a degree. You don't always get it right from the beginning. That's the sort of difficult thing. And then you think, well, what do I do now?
Yeah.
How do I change it? Yeah. So,
and of course, the next thing now, what I'm looking into actually for next year, just to let you all know, is obviously NFTs with and what they mean, and different ways of using them, not just for selling songs, but actually for selling things like merchandise and physical products as well. So that's the next thing for next year.
Right. Wow. Okay. Sounds like lots of stuff to come. Anyway, thanks, Matt. We've also got Mr. Rich Hilton, who's there in Connecticut, who is a live keyboard player for Chic, works with Nile Rodgers in the studio, as many other things, and as a producer, all kinds of stuff. How are you doing, Rich? You well?
Yes, thank you. I'm very well.
Glad to hear it. Yeah, because you were on travels, weren't you, for a while? So are you having a bit of a break from that, or are you back on the road again soon?
No, I expect to be home for a while.
Excellent.
And next year should be a pretty busy one, according to what I'm told.
Right.
So,
well, enjoy it while you can. I think it's probably the way to do it, because as we all know, it's often feast or famine, isn't it? In the music business, you're either kind of too busy or not busy enough. It's hard to be just right busy. I find, anyway. That's the thing. Although I'm not particularly doing much of that sort of thing these days. Anyway, right. Well, let's get on with some stuff. Let's see what's first. What's the? Oh yeah. Well, of course we've got. Let me just do this one, and I think I've got a button here for this. It's the new Boutiques. We've got a JX08. There's David Ireland playing in here, and we've also got, I think this is the JX, oh no, this is the JD08, I beg your pardon, my mistake. Which is this sort of, it's funny, isn't it? It's like the Jupiter 8, seeing this sort of massive muscle synth that was sort of reduced in size, like a stock cube. It's like a stock cube of a synthesizer nowadays. And we've also got, I think there's another, but yeah, there's another one, which is the Roland JX08, which is based on the JX00P. And I believe these use ABD rather than what's the word? ACB.
It's ACB.
So yeah, two new Boutiques. I mean, this is kind of a big deal. And one thing that makes these a little different, I mean, because the early Boutiques, I think they were using ACB, which is analog component. I can't remember the terminology. There's so many different ones, but they were quite limited in terms of voices. Quite often, so we have the JP08, which was again this sort of muscle synth reduced down to these tiny little things, but also with only 4 voices. In this case, I believe the JD has 128 voices, but that's across all partials, because you can have 4 partials per voice. So I guess that would make it 32 if you were using all 4. And the JX that I'm told is 20, but again, it's unclear from the specifications exactly whether that's per oscillator or per part. Also, some but essentially what they've done, it feels like they've added more DSP in terms of polyphony to the previous things. I know, Steve, you were quite keen on these. Are you a sort of boutique fan? Because there's something about them, isn't there? They were kind of thought of a little bit as sort of, people sort of looked down on them, but now they've become like, they're very desirable little things to have about, actually, particularly because you could just hook them up to almost anything and USB them via MIDI, and then suddenly you've got that. I mean, how do you feel about this? Are you going to be going for it?
Well, yeah, absolutely. The ergonomics, I know people complain about them being small, and it's obvious they are small, but they look lovely. They really do. In fact, I ended up getting 2 of each of the first 3, which was the first version of the Juno. There was the Jupiter, and also the JX3P. Simply because I just like being around them. I know that sounds a little bit kind of odd, but
fun friends.
Yeah, And there's a boutique that I use every single day now, which is the SEO2, which is just behind this camera here.
Right. That's a bit
again,
different though, isn't it? Because
yeah,
that's actually that's analog, isn't it? That's a slightly different beast. Yeah.
But that's absolutely right. You're absolutely right. But in terms of the shape and how the machine feels, I think it's great. And it's just so handy to have units that you can just pick up and move around without, you know, being too concerned about your back, for example, or inducing a hernia, which was, of course, was one of the big issues with the original JD800. I went around the world really in the 90s with a JD800, the original, and it's heavy. I've never really understood why it's quite so heavy, but it really is. And of course, it was in a flight case for me as well. And together, the combination of the weight of the synth and the weight of the flight case, it came in, I think it was something like 27 kilograms, which the best way to visualize that is it's uncomfortably heavy, no matter how you carry it. But it was a synthesizer that I had a really quite, I don't know, love-hate relationship with. Because when I first got it, it was the first synthesizer I bought with the advance that came from when my old band signed to Food Records, and so there was a sentimental attachment to that. But it was the fact that we were returning at that point, at least it felt like, to synthesizers that had lots and lots of sliders and knobs on, having spent, I don't know, for me at least, it felt like the best part of a decade where hands-on controls were being removed. Yeah, as we can see on for example, a JX 8P, which the other boutique is made of. So it meant that for someone like me who just never really used presets, I could make my own sounds again, and it could be easy and it could be enjoyable. And that was, I think, why I've kept this machine with me until this very day. It's an actually really enjoyable machine to work with tactily. And also, one thing I've noticed and really like, at least from the photos and videos I've seen of the JD08, is they've kept the same kind of colour for the dashboard, I suppose, and the same colour LEDs, same kind of sliders. And that was a really big part of using the JD800. There was this, it felt like it was a huge palette in front of you with just looked nice to work with. On the downside, though, and one thing I don't think is going to be an issue with this recreation, I had the dreaded red glue problem with the JD800. Have you heard of this?
No.
Okay, it's quite a famous thing. Almost everybody who got a JD800 ended up with the keyboard essentially melting away, which the resin that held the weights underneath the keys just started to, I suppose, disintegrate and perish. And so you'd end up with, and I did, a whole load of glue just coming out of the keyboard and going everywhere. And it was really strong glue, but it was it just, you know,
that's weird.
Gone everywhere.
That's weird. Gosh.
Yeah. Apparently, it happened with a few other models that Roland brought out at the time. But yeah, this happened to me. Oops. So it kind of rendered the machine useless for a bit. I got in contact with Roland about this, and to their credit, they sent over a replacement keyboard completely for free. So it's just a question of opening out the machine and removing some connectors and sticking it back in. And the other thing, of course, though, and I think this might be why I might not be getting a JD08, is the sound of the machine it's not quite there, if you know what I mean. There's certain things that the JD800 did right, really rather well, but lots of things it couldn't really do. So people sort of talk about this being a great pad machine, a bit like people say for the D50, for example, but it's not got the kind of detail and life that you would have expected, for example, from a Wave Station, which was released the same year, as I seem to recall, or even a D50. So you take that out of the equation, maybe. What you are left with, though, that it does sound really good at, it's two things in my experience. It's got a lovely bottom end, a really kind of soft, round, I don't want to call it warm, but just round, nice bottom end to it, which I use to this very day. And also, it's great at making distorted sounds. There's a very famous use of a preset from a JD800 by the Prodigy. I think it's the tune Voodoo People. It sounds like an electric guitar being played, but actually it's a JD800. So
interesting.
Yeah.
Wicked.
It's well worth hearing because whoever programmed that sound did such a good job. It's quite an incredible thing to play.
I wonder if Mr. Persing had a hand in any of that.
Yeah. So, if you want a recreation of an early 90s digital synth, which just has a unique feel in the bottom end and can help you to sound like the Prodigy, I think
maybe
this is the
it
boutique for you.
I know, Rich, it's interesting because I know, this would have been, we were all using digital synths in the studio because of convenience, and that's what was available. I guess around the time that you were probably, in Synclavier world, was this on the radar? Did you have one of these around? Because, this would have been one of the first big hands-on machines that came out, because analog was just not a thing when this was around, or not a thing anymore, shall we say, in polysynths terms.
Yes, we had one. And yes, I used it. And as Steve points out, it marked a significant return to physical controls on the topology of the instrument so that you could affect many things at the same time or get at many things without menu diving. We had just come, as he pointed out, from a menu diving world where the controls had been taken away and you had to go after parameters in depths that were uncomfortable. So this was a big deal at the time. I think it's cute the way they've modeled the kind of angled left side of the panel and the buttons thereupon. And
that is cute, isn't it?
Yeah, and it sounded good in the demo videos to me. Obviously I haven't laid hands on one, and obviously it's got mini keys and not that many of them, but
I think that's the case that you get with it. I think that's the case you get with it because there's an A100 thing that you can slot the boutiques into. I don't think it's actually part of the base model, but they demonstrate them on I think anyway. But I'd probably have to double check that. It does look cute. The JX is also cute. The thing is, it's like the JX08 and the J3 are sort of. They seem like they're probably quite similar, to be honest. But maybe I'm wrong.
Well, the JX series in general were real favorites of mine, particularly the JX10, because it had more of what the JX was 8P was offering, and the subsequent MKS70 rack mount version of the JX10, all of which were some of my favorite synthesizers in that period. And this thing does allow, I think, layering of two programs simultaneously, if I got the gist of the video correctly, so that kind of makes it a little more like a JX10 anyway. And that one, if I was picking one of these two, that's probably the one I'd go for first. But they both instruments look fantastic for the size, shape, money, sound, quality.
Yeah,
I don't have that point of comparison that Steve has because I didn't spend quite so much time on the JD800 and I didn't tour with it. So the differences in sound quality may have been somewhat lost on me, but in general, they both sounded really good to me in the demo videos, and I quite enjoyed the guy doing the demo videos.
Yeah, David Ireland's he's a great guy. Matt, it's interesting. I imagine the boutiques. I'm going to paint you a little picture here, right? So I'm guessing, right, when people come to visit the campus at BIMS, I'd really like to go here. If you had a room with a ton of boutiques all over the place that just look like a candy store, do you think that might influence people, whether people sort of, is that the sort of thing that you might choose to have around the place? Because, they're easier to replace, easier to kind of use. Are boutiques the sort of thing that you guys as educators would have in the building?
Well, yes, I guess we would, mainly from the standpoint that as if we was to buy originals, if we had to get them repaired or they got broken, they're out of action for ages, whereas these relatively easy to get new ones in or to get something replaced along the same lines. they're also ultra portable as well, which means that we can move them around from one place to another, allow students to take them home, and that kind of thing. So, and that they're absolutely fine with it. Actually, I do a lot of the open days at BIM, and when they go look at our resources, we've just built 2 new electronic music production suites, which are essentially built around a lot of there's the boutiques in there, and there's actually some of the new Behringer clones in there as well. And students and prospective students, and that they're really into it, they're really open to it, because that's what they're using. That, they're affordable, so that's what they're tending to go to. And the same actually goes sometimes with software. Sometimes we're doing quite advanced stuff using maybe, a suite of Waves plugins, or even the Isotope stuff, which are fantastic. But sometimes students just want to be taught, how can I achieve the best results with the stock plugins as well? Show me what you can do with just the Ableton or the Pro Tools or the Logic stock plugins, and go from there. We're getting more and more of that, actually. And how they can get those sort of sounds that they want using, the kind of bundled stuff that they get with them. So they're all up for this. I mean, how can you not? I mean, they do sound incredible. I'm with Steve on these, and I really, really think these are great sounding machines. I bought the JX03. It seemed to be the one that nobody wanted, so that was the one that I bought.
Did you get a deal?
And I really loved it. Unfortunately, I had to sell it recently because I'm trying to raise some money for things, and that was one of the things to go, which was a shame. I absolutely loved it. And one thing that I wish they'd accommodated for this, and you probably knew I was going to bring this up, but they don't fit in a 3U. Well, they do fit in a 3U here for Eurorack, but all the connectors are on the top. So without drilling some holes and moving some connections around, you can't plug anything in because they hit the roof of these rails.
That's a shame.
That, for me, I don't know why. Did they do that on purpose? Did they not think about that? Were they really just not thinking about that market? I mean, you can actually buy 19-inch rackiers as well for them. People have done some that glue on, some that screw in. But I think for some people, certainly for me, to have these rack mounted, as because you can have so many of them, they're so affordable, and you can obviously have one master MIDI keyboard for them. To have them rack mounted in something like this, I think ergonomically would work really, really well. So I wonder why that was maybe missed, and maybe that's just a modular fanboy here, just saying I wish that they fit in a modular case, because I'd love to have one sat here to do polyphony, or I'd love to have the 808 or the 909 there just to call up those sounds without having to use my sampler or a computer, that kind of thing. So
I think they'll do well. I don't know if they're going to be limited, because some of them, they did limited editions of, and I think these are $399 US, so they're the standard boutique price. Anyway, I just thought I'd throw it, because that was sorry.
I just wanted to ask one question. What is the difference in terms of technology that they use? Obviously, one's hardware, one's software, but the Roland Cloud stuff, how different is that from the actual, let's say, the coding and things like that? How different is that from the boutiques? Do you know? Are they very different?
No, I think they're quite interchangeable, because you can run Zencore stuff in the modern in the JX. The Jupiter XM and Jupiter X. There are certain keyboards that will run those code bases, so they will run in hardware, and they will also run ACB models and the what's the other one? I can't remember the two ones. I'm sorry, the acronyms have escaped me. And I think they're interchangeable. It's just a more limited parameter set, as far as I understand. I mean, I think that's how it works.
Nick, I could just mention I was trying to replace my. I've had a lifetime's worth of Junos, and I decided to jump into the boutique Juno first, and then the Roland Cloud version of the Juno, and then latterly the System 8 version of the Juno. So we got the same sort of thing running on a few different platforms, and they sound basically identical to me.
Right. I guess
You know,
there's just
I-
differences
I-
in
I'm
A
not-
to
I don't
D
want
and
to say
D
that
to
they
A.
sound identical to.
They should do
Yeah,
because
yeah.
they're the code base. I mean, I mean that's the point. I think that's the point of it. So yeah, I mean that's what Roland
Yeah.
are heading for, to try and bring it all together.
Okay.
Okay, well there you go. I hope there's an answer for you.
Someone in the chat room, yeah, thanks for that, Steve. Someone actually in the chat room mentioned that the
ABM.
yeah, Wagyu actually said that there's the 3U rack version of was it the 1M System 1M?
Yes.
So they had that there. It was available in that one, but not in these new ones. So
well, they put all the
plot
connectors on the top. They put all the connectors on the top
Yeah.
in that one, and that was different because they were they weren't boutique. They were the what's the ones
plug-in
with
kind of things.
yeah, I can't remember what they were called now. I've forgotten the range. Gosh, my
System 1 plug-in.
System
jobbies.
One,
Plug
the
out?
System One stuff, yeah. The plug-out systems. Right. I should just
plug
probably
out.
have a quick word from our friends over at, if you're not familiar, the Black Friday deals have already started. Arturia are kicking off Black Friday with their biggest ever 50% off sale. You've got till December the 8th to save 50% off V Collection 8, Effects Collection 2 and Pigments 3 plus Spectrum sound packs. Of course, V Collection is a huge collection of iconic instruments, new instruments including the OBX-AV, the Emulator 2V, the Juno 6V and the Vocoder V, as well as many other favourites. FX Collection 2 also adds EQs, compressor diode, bus force, and the classic DIM-D, as well as phaser, flanger, chorus Juno 6, plus other EQs, delays, and other processing. And of course, Pigments is their, well, flagship software synth. There's not anything specific, but is a very impressive instrument in its own right with a fantastic modulation matrix. If you're already a customer, log in and get even more discounts. Just head over to arturia.com right now. Yeah, and we thank them for their support of the show, and yeah, good deals on there at the moment, so well worth checking out.
Wow.
In fact, we're probably going to be talking about some Black Friday deals maybe next week as we get right into the thick of it, because I think, you know, as November's almost in the same way that October in the whole month is Halloween now these days, Black Friday deals is kind of almost the whole of November and quite a lot of December as well, so we'll get onto that. Okay, right, let's get into a little bit of true analogness. This is really, really analog. Let me just make sure I've queued it up. Here we go. This is Look Mum's No Computer Pendulum clock, which is a thing of beauty. This is a thing that he made that is essentially based around this old piece of hardware that used to run all the clocks in a building. I thoroughly encourage you to check the video out. I won't play the whole thing because he should get the views, not us. Look, Mum, now this is really interesting because he's basically taken... what's it called? I will get this right. It's called... I think it's either Gents of Leicester or Gents of Leicester. It's a master clock, which is basically a pendulum that was powered by solenoids, but also ran relays, which would run multiple clocks over electricity through the building. So they would all be completely synchronized. I mean, I don't know why you would need that. I guess, you know, if you've got very fixed kind of clocking off and clocking on times, kind of early computational stuff. And there were all sorts of things that were connected to dials and incrementation and subdivisions of essentially 120 BPM, and he goes into that. But what he's done is also built something which takes those clocks and subdivides them down, and you can adjust the modulation bits in between. It's a really interesting piece of electromechanical work, and I must say I thought it was charming. I don't know, Rich, did you get a chance to look at this? It's a beautiful kind of it's just in the way that he only seems to be able to do is sort of he revels in the kind of almost the kind of ridiculous complexity of older technology, but it's a thing of beauty. I love this.
I loved it too, and I thought it was fantastic that he went out and got himself a pendulum specifically for this purpose. To your question about why it would have been desirable back then, particularly in a school setting where classes are being switched on a scheduled basis throughout the day, having all the clocks in the school building arriving at that time when the class is going to switch at the same moment maximizes the possibility that that's going to take place. But his use of it and the way he's subdividing it and using control voltages generated from those subdivided clocks, that was fascinating to me, and I really enjoyed it. And love his enthusiasm. And
Yeah,
I really
it's absolutely
enjoyed this
brilliant,
thing.
isn't it? Incidentally, if you want to check the Museum of Obsolete Things, I think the museum. Sorry, this museum is not obsolete. It's in Ramsgate, unfortunately, which is about as far east as you can get in the UK. Because I thought next time I was in London, I'd go out. I didn't realise it was so far away. But I don't know. What do you think about this, Matt? I mean, I imagine this appeals to you enormously. This is the sort of thing that you would probably encourage BIMs to put in a room and drive all of their synthesizers just so that you could tap a voltage off, right?
Yeah, either that or just bring in one of my clock dividers or something like that.
I know,
but yeah,
but it's
I mean,
not the same, is it?
Yeah, it's not. It's great. I love the stuff that Sam does. I don't know if you've ever met Sam, but
I have. Yeah, he's a great guy. Really enthusiastic.
He's just like that in real life. Yeah, he turned up. I was doing a gig with Heimbach, and he turned up while we were sound checking that. While we were all trying to plug in all the equipment, and he's sort of running around doing his thing. Yeah, he's really cool. He does some really interesting stuff, and I get a little bit envious, really, because I miss having the time to have this kind of, the time to experiment in the way that he does. I used to love doing stuff with my students where we would do things like the old Steve Reich Pendulum music and throw microphones up into the air over rafters and swing them above amplifiers, creating feedback mechanisms from that kind of thing. And doing all that kind of stuff. I must admit, I miss having that sort of time to experiment, and I love his energy with this. And just watching one of his videos just kind of just taps me back into that way of thinking about sound, and creating sound, and different starting points and that kind of thing. You know, I'm not suggesting there's any one right way, of course, to approach music, but I think there's lots of different ways to approach music and music production. And just often things like this can make you just think, yeah, you know what? Why am I always using this or always my go-to that? Try something new, a new starting point, whether it's just going out with your iPhone and recording something in the park, bringing it back and saying, I'm just going to use the sound from that as the starting point. Whether it's downloading a free plug-in synthesizer that's, just really basic and working with that. Whether it's just allowing yourself to use 2 or 3 pieces of kit you've got in your studio and that kind of thing. It's just these different kind of starting points and approaches that I think we're all kind of geeks in a way in music production. We love that creativity. We love that engineering, the fusion of technical and creative aspects. Yeah. And we've just got to remember just to keep ourselves involved with all of this kind of mindset. You don't always have to start by opening up your laptop and opening up a blank DAW. Yeah, that kind of thing. So, it's really cool, really good fun.
It's interesting, Steve, isn't it? You know, our professional lives, we spend all this time trying to streamline our workflow and kind of reduce the friction. Whereas, people like Sam, who has the time to kind of almost create more friction, but by doing so, creates a sort of unique perspective, and it's a really fine line between doing it. But have you been to the museum? I think we should arrange maybe a Sonicstate group coach tour or something, and go and visit it when it's safe.
No, I haven't. I haven't visited it, I'm afraid. It is quite an inspiring video, and it's reminded me of a few things. That first of all, you were talking about the clock comes from a manufacturer in Leicester. I should imagine it's a Victorian design, or maybe late Georgian. I don't know. I'm kind of guessing here.
Oh, it's electromechanical.
Yeah. Well, towards the end of this road here, there's a clock that was built by the Victorians that connected from essentially the centre of Brighton to the centre of London in a place called Greenwich. So if you don't know the geography, that's probably the best part of 60 miles, but they were directly connected so that if you were a rich person of the time, you could come down to Brighton and go and stand in the middle of it and know that you were seeing exactly the same time that you would have been seeing if you were in the middle of Greenwich. And that I always found was kind of nice. But it was one other thing that this video made me think of, Nick, and it's to do with clocking in general. There's something nice about that mechanism, which when it was designed would have been state of the art and as accurate as they could possibly make it. But lots of different reasons, as Rich was mentioning before. But it wouldn't have been perfect like we have today,
No, not atomic, I suppose, yeah.
No, and of course you can use quite simple equations in physics to work out the the period of the swing. But it was never going to be 100% accurate, just things like friction and whatever. And it made me think of this. On Saturday night just gone, I had an accidental massive night out. And I went to a bar just down the road, and there was a DJ playing and a big party going on. So I hung out there for the night, made some new friends. And I really noticed something. The DJ was playing quite a spread of tunes, some from the 90s, particularly late 90s, and some from this year, maybe last year as well. And there was a significant difference in the feel between the tracks. It was all techno, so there's not really been a great deal of change in techno over this time. But there was a kind of fluidity to the older records, a kind of bounce.
Do you think it was Atari? Is that Atari or NPC?
Yeah. Well, yeah, it would have been not just the clocking that was coming from those the Atari maybe running Cubase or the MPC, but it also, I think it was the fact that the MIDI signals were coming out of cables and then going to another unit that had its own latency and I think also crucially its own jitter, and it just meant that although things were basically in time the whole time, if you were lucky, there was always just a slight movement to it in terms of its accuracy, all the instruments in this sort of MIDI chain. And I think it just contributes to a very different feel to the records made electronically with MIDI, let's say, prior to this century, where things have all moved into the computer, where accurate clocks is ultimately what computers depend on. It was just something that kind of occurred to me. I don't know whether I necessarily miss it, but if you line up these records next to each other, you can certainly hear it. So there you go.
That's really interesting, actually. I don't know, Rich. I mean, in the studio, there's a fixation. I mean, among certain kinds of music, not all. I know you obviously deal with great players where less of that kind of editing and moving around on the grid is required, or you're trying to keep some of that. But do you? Okay, I'm generalising, but have you noticed? I mean, it's almost like the boiling frog. You kind of don't notice that things are changing over that period of time. I mean, are you aware of that? Because I mean, you often go back to older multitracks and you're flipping around between eras. So that has the technology changed the feel? Oh, you're muted. Take a drink, everybody.
Yes, take a drink. It certainly has changed the process of looking at that, but I go back, I mean, since I was enjoying Steve's recollection so much, in the early 80s, I was synchronizing the memory mode sequencer via the Dr. Click to FSK tone and triggering other MIDI devices from it. And I discovered that those MIDI devices had a timing offset range of over 60 milliseconds in some cases between them, and so could not be operated simultaneously with a pocket that was desirable, at least to me. So I had developed a fairly fancy trick of delaying the FSK tone 100 milliseconds on the way back for the first pass, which was drums, usually Lindrum, and then having variability on both sides of that 100 milliseconds that would allow me to synchronize subsequent instruments with differing amounts of MIDI response times so that I could create the pocket I wanted.
Neat.
So I don't know that it's changed in terms of the result beyond the fact that aesthetics kind of drive these things, but it's always been possible to do. It's just a question of how Sisyphusian you're willing to be with regards to getting it done. So by the end of the 80s, when I was using the synclavier, I had developed some pretty fancy techniques for using the synclavier to quantize to the degree I wanted live performances that had been taken freely, and was using that for that purpose. And again, you're adjusting things by ear. You're adjusting them to where you think they sound good. So I think the aesthetic's always been, since we've used electronic things to trigger electronics, we've always had to sort of adapt to the delay of the moment, if you will.
The delay of the moment. That's interesting.
So I'm not sure that I don't think the aesthetic has changed. Certainly the methods have changed, and certainly the possibilities have grown in terms of getting it more and more and more precise in terms of predictability. But the aesthetic for me has always been there, and I'm talking about always a long time, always.
Yeah, and I before it was easy to chop samples up. I remember what we used to do was, if I had a vocal that had to be synced for a remix, I'd sample as much as I could get in my 950 or my S1000, and I'd trigger it at a certain point, and I'd put pitch bend data in the gaps between the vocals. So, if you pitch bend it up a little bit, the next bit would get more in time or less in time. I mean, it's a really long-winded way of doing it, because you had to go all the way back to the beginning and then see, by the time you got to the end, it's like, okay, I need to adjust this bit because that last syllable is out. And he used to do all that and that was, I mean, Christ, that was insanely, if you're talking on an S1000, you might get a 90-second sample in there. It was just like, gee, that took a long time. Or it was probably the 950, so more so, because that would be what I was using. But yeah, interesting. That's interesting. I know. I mean, Matt, in many ways, CV and an actual clock and triggers are really rock solid. They're probably the most solid, because there might be some move in it, but they're less likely to be an issue with that and CPU cycles, because it's just base electronics, right? I mean, I'm guessing. I am being...
Yeah. No, you're right, actually. This is quite a timely conversation, because one thing that I'm moving towards is a full hybrid setup of using modular with a laptop, and the issue's always been synchronizing the laptop with this lot here. Inside here, I've got several different clocks. I've got clocks coming out of sequences. I've got standalone clocks. I've got clock dividers, and I've measured them all, and they're all very, very, very tight. They're all very, very good. The issue is, if you're multing things and things like that, then you can bring in jitter and that kind of thing. But syncing your computer still with this, not so great. And over MIDI, no way, not at all. And so actually, this is quite timely. One of the things that seems to be the best solver for this, if anyone's interested, is I think a company called Circuit Happy, and they do this. They do a standalone version. They also do a very small 2 HP module, which kicks out Ableton Link, and Ableton Link runs over. It can generate its own Wi-Fi, it can become its own access point, I guess, or it can join a Wi-Fi that you've already got in the house. That's it there, and these things, an Ableton Link as an alternative for essentially wireless clocking, and bridging that gap between modular or any hardware. I mean, this can be standalone clock. This seems to be, from what I can tell, to be the thing to use. You've got Ableton Link now, obviously in Ableton. You've got it in Bitwig. I don't think it's there in Logic. It's on most, or if not a lot, of the high-end iOS apps. So this thing actually can just spit out clocking information for all your iOS devices, your Mac, and for your modular, all in one go. And it comes with its own web browser interface, so you can change what actually spits out of the two outputs. So you can have different gates, a reset, and you've got a tap tempo on it, and all sorts of things like that. So yeah, it's quite timely we're having this conversation. If you think about music anyway, and this is a whole other discussion, but essentially music is essentially multiplications and divisions and subtractions of time and frequency, when you break it down into that level, really. So we're always playing around with time and that kind of thing, and seeing clocks like a clock divider is really good for anyone who's trying to come up with interesting rhythms instead of drawing things in on a grid or whatever. Actually seeing something like a clock divider where it can divide things up to 8 and you can see triplets, and you can see things divided by 5 or 7, and what that actually looks like, and it's blinking at you. You can get a great idea for rhythms visually before you even start plugging or patching anything in. And then you start thinking about, well, what if I combine those? And then you start using a mixer for those kind of things, and adding these numbers together, which again goes back to what I just said, which is adding, multiplying, subtracting, time, frequency.
Interesting.
So yeah.
Nice one. Well, thank you very much. I should probably, running a little bit late, so I should probably just now have a little word from my friends over at Isotope, who are also running a Black Friday sale, and I'll give you some details on how to maybe save a little bit more money, even on top of that, just after this message.
Isotope Producers Club is a one-of-a-kind membership for producers ready to take their tracks to the next level. Once you join, you'll gain access to powerhouse Isotope plugins and a curated selection of tools from our partners, such as Melodyne from Celemony. Plus, as long as you're a member, you'll get every future update to the Isotope plugins in your membership for no extra cost. We'll also regularly serve you new curated content like exclusive inspiration-sparking sample packs and preset packs, and industry-leading training ranging from our own tutorials to vocal production lessons from the world-renowned Berklee Online, taught by Grammy-winning producer and engineer Prince Charles Alexander. With new content being added every month full of valuable production techniques, tips and tricks, and solutions to common production problems, becoming a member is an investment in your career that grows as you and your career do. For more information on Isotope Producers Club, head to isotope.com.
And of course, if you head to isotope.com, that's not the button I want. This is the button I want, /Sonictalk, you will be brought to this page here, which will also have a link to some Black Friday sale stuff, which is actually live and direct at the moment. And if you wanted to save a little bit more, you go to, say, Neutron 3 Standard. I've already... Excuse me, I've already done this. And you add the coupon code SONIC10, you can save an additional 10% on all of those savings. I'm not sure if they meant to keep that live, but I'm just going to tell you out there, and you can get a whole bunch of stuff. I mean, they're doing loads of sales, not the holiday bundles, all the usual things, and you can save 10% additionally on an already big sale. We thank Isotope for continually sponsor the show. I know they are listeners and have been for many years, so thanks guys, much appreciated, and gals, much appreciated. Okay, now I was going to get onto, I think we should probably get onto this one, because this is kind of an interesting, this seems like it might be a really interesting new piece of technology. So that's the wrong one. This is the one I wanted.
Mixing engineers have fixed recording problems using parametric EQ since the 70s. EQ in all its varieties can correct certain issues, but recordings often get complicated with many factors like equipment, location, and level of isolation. When EQ can't get the job done, engineers spend time devising intensive and specific solutions.
I particularly like the engineer not being able to get the job done. This is the new Eventide Split EQ, which is a really interesting. I mean, I don't know how new it is, but it feels like it's new. It's creating a bit of a stir. I've seen it advertised everywhere, and I've seen people talking about it as well. And it takes the incoming signal and it can split it between the transient and the kind of sustained portion, and you can EQ those differently, and I think dynamically. And from the examples that they were playing, there were some really interesting and quite effective things going on there. Rich, I'm going to come to you, because I'm you probably use EQ more than I do, because your day job is working with audio where EQ is required, and specific types of EQ for specific jobs, whereas I just use whatever's in front of me if I need to make my voice brighter or duller. That's kind of the extent of it most of the time. And I know the Eventide people are very smart. Have you had a chance to check this out?
I have not had a chance to use it. I did look at their video and listen to their examples and examine how they've applied what is already sort of existing technology, which separates the tonal aspects from the envelope aspects. And we've seen things that are usually called transient shapers that do that, that purport to do that. And so once that analysis possibility becomes available, why not stick it in an EQ? I have to use it to know. There's a part of me, the old part, that feels that this could be enough rope with which to hang one's self. But at the same time, there may be a level of expertise with it that does get you the most desirable result imaginable, and that I just haven't experienced yet. So I'm open to it. It's a very clever use of what I think is more or less existing technology to apply to this kind of thing. I am a giant fan of dynamic EQs, and have had good success using them to mostly tame harshnesses that arise above a certain vocal threshold. But there are plenty of other uses for them as well, and I imagine there could be a lot of uses for this. But I just have to see how easy it is to use and how likely it is that I think people are going to be able to get good results with the thing, because you're looking at deeply separating two things across the full bandwidth rather than just your kick drum, rather than just saying, how's the attack on this kick drum versus the sustain portion, and do I need to readjust that? And that's one kind of transient shaping that we've all now been dealing with for probably a couple of decades, or maybe a decade and a half. It takes that whole thing to another level, and I do need to actually spend some time with it to know.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point. Just to let you know, it's on offer $99 at the moment from $179. So it's a reasonably good deal. That's kind of almost half price, I would say, 50%, almost exactly 50%. Steve, I don't know how much mixing. I mean, listening to some of the stuff that you've been putting out, there's a lot of care and attention that's gone into the sound of that. So I'm guessing, EQs. The tools we generally reach for are often just ones that are in the DAW, and you just use that. But it's not a very sexy thing to buy, is it? A sort of third-party EQ plugin, or indeed an equalizer in many ways.
No, I think you're absolutely right there, Nick. And I was just thinking of what Rich was saying. I've got plenty of, I've got a whole selection of ropes here that I've hung myself with over the years. I think I'm very happy to get another one in. This plugin looks really interesting. When I first looked at this on their demonstration video, there was a good couple of minutes I was thinking, yeah, okay, sure, fine. I couldn't really see what this was going to give me that I wasn't already getting from Soothe and, if you have to say that carefully, by Oak Sound or OX Sound. They do the really, really incredibly useful sort of dynamic processors. Then about 3.5 minutes into the video, they show you how they've used this split EQ to isolate the instruments that are playing within what seems to be, if not a full band recording, it's certainly bass guitar and drums. And they've managed to essentially remove the drums.
I didn't see that.
And left the bass and the guitar there. This was extraordinary. We've seen stuff like this, similar to this, with Isotope's RX software, which is amazing. I use all the time. But that's an offline process, and it's not terribly tweakable. This seems to be like an online process, as in real time, I should say. And you can tweak it as you go, and you can just sort of tune in what transients are going to survive and what aren't. So just basically, just to cut to the chase, the idea of putting in, let's say a sample of an old record or something that I've recorded or whatever, and being able to eliminate or enhance instruments based on the quality of their transients as well as their frequency, I think could be creatively, it could be extraordinary. So, and given that this is $99, I will definitely be getting this. I do think that the proof is in the pudding, which is what Rich has said, in the sense that the concept seems great, but what's it like in reality? But if it is as simple as it shows on the demo video, it's worth 99 of my bucks.
Right. Oh, well, excellent. It's interesting, Matt. Another example was they took an acoustic guitar, I believe, and they sort of put the sustain on one side and the fret noise on the other, like you would often mic a stereo, an acoustic guitar like that. So it's sort of almost creating kind of pseudo stereo out of a single source. It looks like it's got a lot of interesting points, and as we know, I mean, Eventide have been certainly a history of being the algorithm meisters for many decades. So this is just another new string to the bow and a new fancy one that they've come up with. But it looks good.
Yeah, I've got the whole Eventide Suite plugin. I have that. I have Sound Toys, and that's pretty much it. I think they're the only things that I have installed these days. I've got some of the Arturia stuff, and by the way, that 50% off looks amazing. The filters and the reverbs are brilliant. The delays. This plugin though is I don't get excited about EQs. I'm like with Steve. Soothe is great. I think the only other EQ that I bought is the Waves H EQ, which does middle and side EQ, which if anyone hasn't experimented with middle and side EQ, it'll just open up a whole new world for you. When I first came across middle and side EQ, I was like, oh, I see. That allowed me actually to get a lot of the kind of traits that this one's moved totally into that world of. That ability that you just mentioned, Nick, of separating the kind of strumming and the other things left and right. You can't do that with middle and side, but you can do a lot of other things with middle and side. In fact, every single release I've done this year, bar maybe two of them, are just stereo mixes. They're live jams, stereo mix, and that's all I end up with. I'm just about capturing the moment. That's all it is for me. And they're not necessarily mixed amazingly. In fact, I can't mix them afterwards. They are mixed on the fly. I have to make all those decisions as I'm performing about levels, about frequency, all that. Once it's printed, it's printed. So what I can do only really is a bit of EQing and a bit of limiting, and that's all I can do. Now, the Waves H EQ has allowed me to do a lot of stuff with middle and side, which has got me out of trouble a few times, and just using limiting like L1, L2, that kind of thing. But what this will allow me to do, and this is why I'm keen to try it out, for someone like me who's just basically jamming and recording to 2-track, this is going to be a good get out of jail card, I'm sure, for things like, for example, pretty much my kick drums are always too quiet when I'm recording down, and that's mainly to do with the monitoring of my room. I think they're louder than they are, and that's just because I'm in a bit of a cavernous, boomy area here. So what this will probably allow me to do is grab them a little bit more and pull them up, which will be really interesting. But what I'm also interested in is going back to what you just said, Nick, which is about splitting that sound and splitting it left and right. Imagine applying that to a full mix of a track. You could really mess stuff up, couldn't you? You could send all you kind of, I know a lot of the transients from a synth line to the left, and then all the kind of tonality to the right of a full mix. That might be quite interesting. So I'm definitely interested in sort of trying to misuse this plugin and see what I can squeeze out of it. $99, yeah, it's a lot of money for an EQ, but there's nothing that
not
does
as much
this
as $179.
Really,
That's for sure.
Yeah, totally, man. Totally.
I just wanted to say I've put a poll in the YouTube chat just because it certainly popped up so for show title. We've currently got Red Glue Fiasco or the Algorithm Masters are the two titles that I'm working on at the moment. So if you want to vote on that, that's currently in the YouTube chat. We're working on trying to introduce this across more platforms, but I just thought I'd throw that in there. This does look interesting. So yeah, definitely. How's everybody for time? Because I was just thinking we could. There are more topics, but I'm conscious that we've had a lot of your time. Is everybody okay? How are you doing, Steve?
I'm
okay.
No, I'm afraid I have to. I'm doing tech support on a award show, actually, internet award show. So I'm going to have to go in a few moments.
Okay, all right. Well, we'll say maybe what we should do is we could say goodbye to you, and then maybe we can throw in one more topic if everybody's up for it. Just because I'm on a roll. I'm making up for last week. But Steve, thank you so much for joining us. Now I'm kicking you off prematurely. I do apologise for that.
No, it's a bit like when you're at a party and you say, "I better go soon." Everyone says, "Oh, bye." It's like,
yeah, no, I haven't gone yet.
Like, oh,
I did ask.
done.
It wasn't. I did want to put this out there as well because I was checking out your. If you go to stephenhillier.net, you've got your variations, and there's a new track on there which from October, which I thought sounded really lovely. What is that image? Is it a piece of mother of pearl?
I'm not entirely sure. There's an old and dear friend of mine. We've worked together over the years. Photographer and artist called Roger Newbrook, and he's done. Do you know what, Nick? I'll have to ask him. I love the image, but I haven't thought to ask him what it is. So I will do.
It looks like a slice, maybe a slice of quartz or something. But anyway, Steve, thank you so much for joining us. But it's been a pleasure. Sorry, I'm cutting you off now. You've still got a minute. Use your time. Say what you need to say. No, it's okay. Thanks so much for having me, and any other artwork queries I'll try and answer on Twitter. Excellent.
Cheers, guys.
All right, thank you very much, Steve. Lovely to have you. Well, if the rest of you are okay, we can maybe do the. I wasn't sure. What does anybody feels more strongly about the studio management tool or the RTX case? I guess computer cases are a little bit. A show of hands for the studio management tool. Yeah, that's dry.
Management tool.
I would have gone for the Zoom hard disk.
Oh, yes, of course. The Zoom thing.
Yes.
All right, let's do that then.
All right.
Is this it? No, that's not. This is
No,
it.
that's...
Yep, I got it. Okay, let's do the Zoom thing.
Hi, I'm Omar Hakim. Today,
Hi, Omar.
me and my band, Osmosis, are going to do some recording. On
Random product demo guy of the work.
Yeah. Groove or an idea right away. And I don't want to turn on my laptop and I don't want to fuss with an audio interface. I just want to plug in a mic and just start recording the idea. When I first saw the R20, I thought...
Okay, I won't play that. I saw. I was like, Omar Hakim, like world-renowned superstar drummer. You know, man who played on... I mean, so many things, but Peter Gabriel, so many other stuff.
In our band.
With Rich, has he played with you? You played with Rich?
Yeah, he played 10 years in our band.
Wow. Cool. Did he tell you about this then? Were you aware of this latest performance, his latest appearance?
Well, the last time he played in our band was about 15 years ago, so
okay.
he didn't mention this particular device. But this is a very interesting device, and many interesting things about it, but I love the quickness and the convenience and the fact that you can plug mic straight into it and just go into record and have an SD card in it and go for it. It's interesting. I'm going to go right to the core of this thing. It's interesting that it's got one sample rate, 44.1.
Yeah.
Period.
That is a bit
like 44.1 because that's what it's got. Not so much as 48.
That is, well, it is 24-bit, I suppose. It does do 24-bit.
Yeah. And it's not like in a blind test I'm likely to get them all right when you start playing them to me. But still, that's a very interesting design choice to make in a world where you can buy a $200 interface that'll do 96K.
Yeah, I would agree with that. It's interesting. I mean, the thing that's cool about this, I mean, just a quick, it'll record up to 8 tracks at the same time. It's got very limited, so it's got phantom power on a couple of inputs. It's also got just literally record ready, gain, and a fader. But it's also got a touchscreen which allows you to move and cut and paste and kind of copy and loop clips. So it kind of makes it a little bit more like almost an iPad experience, but just the fact that we can just grab it. I mean, I'm not sure how comfortable I'd feel with editing multi-track masters on a tiny little touchscreen like that. But, and to be fair, this is on the Zoom Japan site. We don't know anything more about it. A couple of other sites, Synthtopia and Synth Anatomy, picked up on it. And I spotted it as well. And I was just thinking, because Zoom, quite often things show up on the Zoom Japan site before they show up anywhere else. So we don't know how much it's going to be. I'd imagine affordable. But we've seen I think it's the L20 and the L16, which were more mixer based stuff. This is just sort of more straightforward and simpler. This looks kind of cool. Be nice to throw in a bag and just kind of record a band without too much other stuff going on, although obviously you'd have to deal with mic splits and whatnot if you were using it in a like a live situation. But for the basic idea, kind of pretty cool. What do you think? Do you encourage this kind of one box does it all? I mean, it's a bit like the blue box, but no effects and more stuff.
Yeah, I think for multiple purposes, this is great. This is great if you are rehearsing. You're in a band, you're in a rehearsal room, just bang, chuck a few mics into there so you can actually take something away relatively easily, load it up onto a DAW when you get home and listen to things that with the multi-track, basically. And for anyone who's in a band, by the way, I would always say record your rehearsals so you can have a listen back to them objectively, because they sound a lot different when you're in that moment in the room, I'm sure. So I'd always recommend that. So this lends itself to that. It only allows you to record 8 of the tracks simultaneously, though. That's the only thing. So you're limited to that. And I'm wondering if maybe
16-track playback, I think, as well. Yeah,
16-track playback. And I'm wondering if they're going to test the waters with this, because this is still in its concept phase. So I'm wondering if, in fact, they're going to test the waters with this, and then they'll maybe offer the next model up, which will offer more tracks. There are quite a lot of things on the market, a lot of sound cards on the market. And actually, we talked about this a couple of weeks ago when I was on the show. I think it's a Tascam sound card I had my eye on, or an Allen and Heath one. And it's got nothing on it except for a record button and a USB stick. And, there's a play button. And you can just record, I think it's like 16 tracks straight away, very high frequency. I'm not sure it does 96. It might do. Straight to USB. And literally then take your USB out, chuck it into your Mac, drag those files into a DAW, and you're golden. Essentially providing you with what you've got here. But I don't think it has the XLR inputs like this.
Yes, because this isn't even combi, is it? This is purely there is 2 combis and then the rest two combis and the rest. Yeah, so it's very. I mean, I suppose the thing is if I was to see something like this at a rehearsal room, it wouldn't be much use. But something like the XR18, or I know some of these digital mixers which have all of this stuff, and then if you just show it with a computer and you just plug it in and just go, can you just record all the inputs I've got coming out? Then that makes more sense to me. Something that's a bit more integrated in terms of a digital desk with recording features, or a sound card with recording features, because you're going to be using it in situ perhaps already. What this has got going for it is those XLR inputs, bang, straight in, go. Portability, slam it in your bag. You don't need a computer, you just need a power supply and you're good to go. And that little touch screen, for what it's I wouldn't think of doing any editing on it, but to actually visually see the kind of arrangement, see your sound waves going in, you'll get an idea if your waveform's clipping or not, that kind of thing. So they're the main things that's got going for it over a standalone sound card without the XLR. You're still going to need a computer in some cases to power it, but you're certainly going to need a mixer anyway to plug in those microphones. So there's pros and cons to this. It's interesting. I'm surprised we haven't really seen anything like this before. I'm wondering if something similar could be achieved though with an iPad. With a small interface, but it entirely can. I know that that's what Gaz does with his Cubasis and an XR18. I mean, Rich, do you record rehearsals from time to time? And I know you've mentioned that, And do you do a split, or how would you?
I just usually it's been a long time since I recorded a rehearsal. Usually our sound crew does it via whatever digital console they're using in the rehearsal space. But the last time I did it, I just brought a Zoom H4n stereo device and put it in front of the band, and that was us recording rehearsal. It wasn't intended for
not multi-track
further usage. But one other very possibly interesting usage for this thing is as a tracks playback device for bands who require such in their live performances, which is like a lot of bands. So I believe it does seem to operate to clock tempos, because I saw one of those displays.
I think it's got real-time time stretch. Yeah, there's a time stretch thing going on there as well.
But in any case, just for playback of backing tracks, this could prove to be a rather useful
It could
device.
be. The only thing is it only seems to have a stereo out, which is not enough. I mean, there are other
Is that
devices.
right?
Yeah, that's it. There were some other. There was
Well, in some circumstances,
it would work.
I mean, you could mix 16 sources out of that stereo output on the device. So there's something to be.
That's true.
There's some use for that at certain price points, at certain experience levels.
It would need. It feels like it would. It's almost like, well, if you didn't have the touchscreen but you had more outputs, it might be more useful, because I would imagine one was unlikely to edit a full multi-track and create a music edit on something like that when you could do it more easily, presumably on an actual iPad or something with a screen or something with a bit more kind of information going on. Maybe I don't know, but
yeah. I understand.
Yeah,
I understand.
Because
with an iPad, you have to connect an interface with multiple outputs on it. I mean, there's a different level of complexity.
Yeah, that's true. Anyway, I thought I'd just throw that up there. I thought it was kind of fun, thanks for guiding me that way. So far, how's the show title doing? I'll bring that up on this page. Looks like Red Glue Fiasco is winning by quite a margin, with almost 80% of the votes there. So thanks for your input, folks. Much appreciated. Matt, it's been lovely to have you. I guess you're back to creating the last couple of tracks of the year for you, and do tell us when your video's up, because when you've done that sort of data analysis, because I'd be very interested in that.
Yeah, I certainly will. It's probably something I'll do over Christmas when everyone's got a bit of time and they want to sit down. I'll probably do it as a live stream, so people can get involved as a bit of a Q&A, that kind of thing. And also just to celebrate the end of doing the one track a month for the whole year and making it through. And also getting a lot of questions about, what's now in the racks and that kind of thing. Yeah. So I'll probably do a little walkthrough of what modules have been useful in all of the tracks I've been using, how I've used them, ones that haven't, what I've been surprised about, all that kind of thing, really. Mixing, full recaps coming. So, yeah, I'll certainly let you know on that, Nick. But thanks for having me. Great to be here with Rich and Steve.
You're absolutely welcome, as ever. And Rich, lovely to see you again. I'm glad you're going to have a little bit of quality time at home, although I guess it's perhaps not barbecue weather. Has the snow started falling yet, or is it still clement?
It's it's clement, but it's cold at night. It was -4 centigrade this morning, but it's up around 15 degrees centigrade now. So it's getting there, and there will be snow soon. But I am happy to be home and taking care of some projects here at home, and it's all good.
Excellent. Well, lovely to have you all, and lovely to have everybody here. So I guess that's it for this week. We'll say Steve can't wave because he's gone early, but thank you very much, everybody. And if you have been supporting us on Patreon, your name of the upper tiers should appear now, assuming the tech works. But that's it for this week. We'll say goodbye and thanks for watching. See you next time. Bye-bye now.